So originally I was going to do a video on Gerald's response to Not Gay Jared, which had a lot of interesting aspects to it, but I found a really great video that actually covered it really, really well. It's a guy named Sean Fitzgerald, I think, who has a channel called Actual Social Justice Warrior. And I'm just going to link that in the description of today's video because it's phenomenal. It's really well done, and I don't think I could add all that much to it. And after watching that video, I came across this one and saw that this guy was on Tim Pool or the Timcast, and I was ready to just watch this and just move on. I didn't even know. I didn't really think that I wanted to do any more about this subject. I wanted to move on. But Tim Pool says something in this video that actually bothered me so much and has bothered me for many, many years about conservatism. And I just wanted to talk about it real quick. So I guess with that, let's just get into this and start figuring this out. The context of this is that they are discussing no-fault divorce and whether or not Hillary Crowder should have access to funds from the Crowder estate so that she can have, some would say, fair legal counsel during the divorce to make sure that she got a decent deal.
One of the big issues that actually was the reason why I was like, hey, we should do a show on this was the conservative feminists who came out being like, Crowder should have to pay. And like this idea that, what I said was Crowder is paying $25,000 a month. It's a temporary order during the proceedings. It's been stated by numerous people, but everyone's arguing what's true and what's not. So it is in dispute, I suppose. But the Crowder estate, which is both the Crowder and his wife, are paying the legal fees of all the lawyers involved. So which makes sense considering you're splitting up assets in a divorce anyway. Crowder then has to additionally pay $25,000 to her per month, which she's then using for all of her legal fees in response to the Crowder lawsuit, which is separate.
This is inaccurate. So in Texas, so I looked this up because I assumed this to be true because I was like, this is so like bold. So in Texas, at the end of a divorce, the estate will cover the fees. That is something that will happen. But the presumed rule in Texas is that you have to put up the money in the beginning of the proceedings. So since Crowder's a stay-at-home mom, Hillary Crowder, obviously.
Both Crowder.
Yeah, both Crowders are stay-at-home moms. It's a really weird divorce case. She has to file a petition, and then they allot her a certain amount of money. That amount is the $25,000. That temporary court order is supposed to cover her attorney fees and minimal living expenses, because the idea is if you marry somebody and you get them to leave their job, like Stephen did, she was making more money when they got married, and do we
know how much?
He said in the past that he wanted the traditional life. So even though she was making more money, because they married 10 years, like he was starting out. So that you can't just like run up the costs on them when they can't literally have any lawyer. Like, so this is different from like whether you're using lawfare or whatever. And so that's what the $25,000 is for. Like, that's what it's supposed to be covered. And that's why it's a temporary motion. But, like, you had said at one point it's child support. It's not child support. Texas caps child support even at the max end at, like, $9,200. So it's definitely not that. This is to cover her legal costs. But there's been additional documents that she has incurred way more lawyer bills. Lauren Southern actually published it in her video, the actual ruling by the judge, that had to have him set aside additional money because you do have to pay for these individual motions and all these different hours related to the case. So that money has been wildly misinterpreted on purpose, by the way, by Gerald, that this is money that she's putting in her pocket in order to spend. It's just not true.
My view on this, what I tweeted was, okay, fair point on the child support. If it's not child support, it was like a temporary. It's like an allotment he has to pay her during the proceedings.
And that's to protect Crowder, right? Because if it was the estate that just paid unlimited, then she could do like what a lot of people think he's doing, where you're just running up the costs on the estate. So by the time the divorce is over,
and so my point is,
he's bankrupt.
My point was that he has to pay her for. I believe she initiated the divorce.
She filed, but like remember, she filed after Crowder had already hired a lawyer and moved out of the house and cut her off financially. So like technically she initiated the divorce and legal documents.
I think she's entitled to nothing during these proceedings. And I think the problem is no fault divorce. And I think we're not dealing with a traditional at-fault divorce. We're dealing with irreconcilable differences. And I think the real answer should have been that when problems arose, a judge told them both, STFU, you are in a marriage. It is a sacred covenant. You will not do X, Y, and Z. The problem I have with this is...
Okay, so right off the bat, what you have to ask, when he says stuff like, well, I think that she's entitled to nothing, presumably on the basis that she began divorce proceedings. I guess the question is whether or not conservatives actually believe that a marriage is an equal responsibility, that the man and the woman are ultimately equal partners. Because if they are, then she absolutely is entitled to a portion, at least, of the estate, if not 50-50, right? That's the actual conservative viewpoint, that it's the only one that should be had. That if there is divorce, that if there is a problem that results in divorce, that the woman should get 50% because it's a 50-50 partnership. This is the old talking point from conservatives, that ultimately women have a job and a role at home. That they should do that job, that they should love that job, that they should relish that job, that they do something for us in the family unit that cannot be valued and evaluated by capitalism. That is what conservatism at its core says about wifely duties. That ultimately they will never see the money that they should. If they were to, for example, do all the work that they do to have babies, to take care of the home, to manage the home, to manage things like gardening services or being around so that, the maintenance guy can show up, or, take the kids to school, take the kids to soccer practice. Doing a mother's work it really is like doing every job on the planet all at once. And they don't have the time to take on extra work if they're doing it right. These are the same kind of people who will tell you that you should homeschool your kids. Right? So not only are these mothers supposed to be Uber drivers and maintenance workers and administrators and cooks and chefs and personal shoppers, they should also be teachers. This is an incredibly difficult thing to juggle and do. So the question for Tim Pool is, what the hell are you talking about? What do you believe? Steven Crowder would not exist as Steven Crowder, presumably by conservative standards, had Hillary not been behind him, working behind the scenes. I'm just really tired of this point. It's such a stupid feminist point that because Hillary didn't have some kind of paycheck involved in all the work that she was doing, that she is valueless, is a liberal idea. That everybody, this is what Marx was talking about, man. This was what Marx was talking about. That these hyper capitalists can only see people insofar that they are making money, that they are evaluated as a money sign. And that we have to reform that we have to move past that. We need a system that does not allow people to be evaluated that way and therefore thrown away when that evaluation reaches zero. That's really what Marxism is at its core all about. That is the major complaint. Now, the results of Marxism are terrible and disgusting and do not function in reality. But Marx, and I have always said this, Marx and Lenin were always asking the right questions about capitalism and industry. And here we are, confused as ever, confused as always. Do you value your wife? That's really, when when a divorce happens, if you are a stand-up guy and you want to prove that you're the conservative of all conservatives, you give your wife 50-50. Thank you, honey. Thank you for everything that you did. It didn't work out, and I'm sorry that choices were made and things happened that shouldn't have happened. But I wouldn't have been here without you. My business wouldn't have been here without you. Do you have any idea how much sometimes I wish I had a wife at home to make me food, to make me dinner, to keep me healthy? I understand the value of that because maybe it's because I don't have it. There are so many times where I end up cooking dinner for myself, and I just think, and it's pathetic usually, right? As a single individual, you end up sort of cutting corners, and there are things not on the table that could have been there that would have made that meal truly great and kept you healthier, if we're being honest. I could do a lot more with myself and the time that I have in the day if I didn't have to worry about a lot of the stupid crap that you have to do. And if I had a stay-at-home woman who cleaned and cooked and took care of problems the menial garbage throughout the day, and on top of that could have my children and teach them and keep them homeschooled and safe from the public school system raping children's minds, there is no value that I could ever put on that, ever. And then we start talking about divorce, and all of a sudden it turns out that all these supposed conservatives don't value that shit at all. At all. They're liars. These people are liars. They do not value stay-at-home women. They don't. They do not value homemakers. That's what they're saying here. That's all.
Marriage has become dating. It's dating with like strings attached in the financial world after the fact. No. Don't get married if you don't want to get married, okay? If you don't want to get into a position where you have to file for a divorce and hire lawyers for these reasons, then don't get married at all.
Yeah, this is a smokescreen for the actual discussion being had here, because the obvious question that could be asked is, what do you do in the face of abuse? We already did a video about how Steven Crowder was abusive. I mean, if you are being honest about the Ring video, the famous Ring video that Hillary Crowder put out, whatever the externalities about how she put it out and how it was leaked and who leaked it and everything, that is an abusive situation. That's what it looks like. Looks like an abusive situation. So in this case, the question becomes, Tim, what if they're being abused? You're just supposed to what? Bite your lip and take it? Constantly? Forever? Until you die? For the sake of what? Civilization? Society?
And so the issue is not so much like in this argument I'm making, it's not to do with Hillary or Stephen specifically. It's about the fact that we live in this world where people get married and then go, you know what? It was a mistake. Let's sever ties. You pay me. No, okay, hold on. This whole thing is broken. The whole thing is broken.
In a vacuum, he's absolutely correct. And believe me, I know that there are plenty of cases in which people just, they get bored. I said it before in prior videos, where somebody, it turns out, just wasn't taking the relationship that seriously. They thought that it was the best deal that they could get. They took it. Maybe they went on Instagram. Maybe they started posting videos, started getting attention from men, and all of a sudden, the wife decides, you know what, I could do better. It happens. That happens 100%. And those are shitty people, and those are bad people. And that's a bad situation. That's absolutely true. What Tim is, of course, about to say here, and this is always weirded me out. What he's about to argue for is a court system that says that, you know, once you are married and make that sacred covenant, there is no ability to change the nature of that thing. As Jesus Christ once said, how can you make one become two? That was his big argument against divorce. And there's, hey, again, in a vacuum, it all makes sense. Let's hear the argument, and then I want to talk a little bit about my view on quote-unquote Christian divorce.
The other point, you know, so like Lauren Southern responded to me saying, or she responded in general to many people. So what? Hillary gives up her job for Stephen, but now that they're getting a divorce, she has no money. And I'm like, even if she kept her job, she would never have anywhere near as much money as Steven Crowder has. Like, so I don't appreciate this argument that Crowder as a wealthy.
And Steven Crowder would never have become Steven Crowder without Hillary Crowder. Do you understand that? Do you get that? Do you understand the value of a wife? These are not two separate people who lived on entirely parallel universes. Steven Crowder existed on the basis that he had a wife at home taking care of things, that she was working on things with him and working on the show with him and doing stuff to help him. And this idea, I don't even understand what is he saying here, that Hillary is expendable, that you could swap her out with any woman or something? The simple fact of the facts of the case are that Steven Crowder became Steven Crowder in no small part because he married Hillary Crowder. Yes, would Steven have been something, would he have been successful without her? Sure. Absolutely. Would he have made bazillions of dollars like he has without her? We'll never know.
Man pays her $25K a month. If Steven Crowder was worth nothing and had no job, we wouldn't be having this argument. So it's not an issue of whether she's entitled to as a woman and give up her job. It's an issue of Steven has money, therefore they think he should pay. So there's an interesting phenomenon here that for some reason has emerged in this particular case, where you're seeing a lot of these traditional conservatives actually come out as full-on feminist as soon as it comes to the issue of divorce.
I don't think it's feminist at all. If you want,
but it literally
if you want to incentivize tradition,
bizarre, because he just gets it so he's gotten it so twisted in his head that now he thinks that he's arguing against feminism, when in fact the reality is that feminism is the idea that you have to bolster yourself against people like Steven Crowder and Tim Pool, who would argue that they don't owe their wife anything at the end of the day. That they made the money and it's in their name, so it's their money. This is exactly why feminism exists.
Marriage, like you can't like put one party in a position where they get totally like ripped off in case of a divorce.
You're correct, and
like,
the response is to not allow divorce.
The feminist response is to say that all these women need to like store away money in case of a divorce.
No, it isn't.
Like in order to pay for it. Like
the traditional response to how you fix marriage is divorce is not allowed.
Okay, but
there's rare circumstances where like a guy is threatening to murder and beating his wife and his kids, and infidelity is one of these things. These are people who I don't think those accusations are on the table. They're mostly just angry with each other and yelling at each other, and they're not getting along. That's where a judge comes in and says, you are grown adults. You will behave appropriately. You have children. Those children need functioning parents. You will treat this relationship properly, get therapy, and at the very least, if you don't like being around each other, you will be professional. And you chose this covenant. We now as a society, this is why it is absolutely a feminist position to say we should allow for divorce over irreconcilable differences.
But like, what are you advocating for? For them to like live in the same house when they don't like each other? Like,
yes,
that's crazy.
I think that this
is the old problem of conservatism that just sort of starts making stuff up and they think they're being fundamentalist, right? One of the things about conservatives that you always find, I'm like this as well, is that they're always trying to get to the root of the problem, which is justifiable. It makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't you want to deal with the very root of the issue? And so the root at the cause of something like divorce, in I think Tim would say, are things like ego, lust, foolishness, and what you have to realize is that in that sense, we have to attack that as this sort of as a way to attack the very root of the issue, to get to the bottom of things. And you know, their policy for doing that is always inescapably stupid, because there is no way that a judge can tell two people who are at each other's throats in the midst of a divorce that they have to live together for the sake of the children, that you're under house arrest or something like that. It's just, and frankly, even if they could, how good would that be for the family? How good would that be for the kids? Can you imagine being a kid and your parents are at each other's throats just screaming at each other constantly because they can't leave the house because some judge told them that they have to stick together because they were married. You know what I mean? This is not being thought through. That's all. It's just not being thought through.
Then don't get married. Don't get married. This is what I'm saying. You don't have to get married. Nobody made them do it. They said, let's get married. And then 10 years later, they're like, I'm not having fun. I quit.
So in your like theory of like how this should work, like, so you should be able to theoretically, using an example very like not related to this at all. Like, you know, let's say you're a media personality and you move out, buy a townhouse, and then you cut your wife off financially. Like, you should be able to do that. There should be no court redress for that.
Literally the opposite.
That's what happened in this case. So no, as long as you don't get divorced, though.
No, the judge will say, stop, you are married, STFU, you will both be in this house, you will raise your kids, you will stop fighting, and you will get therapy. If you don't want to get married, don't get married.
You just...
Yeah, so it goes on like this. We don't need to hear any more from this thing. But Sean does a great job with Tim, by the way. He lays it down pretty good. Go watch this debate. I think it's actually quite interesting that there's a clip out of this discussion, and it doesn't include this part, and I think there's a reason for that. But Tim Pool here is just showing how infantile he can be, and how this really is a kid in elementary school who says stuff like, well, we should just make them. We should just make, it's literally Anakin Skywalker in Attack of the Clones saying that dictatorship doesn't sound so bad, Yeah, well, we'll just make them. We'll just make them. It's so interesting because the conservative ideal is always freedom over safety and freedom over stability. That's always one of the great concepts that have been developed ever since the Enlightenment period. And it's, the Enlightenment wasn't always a good thing for us in the grand scheme of things, but that was one of the things that came out of it that really, really did save us in the long run and created America. America would not exist without the idea that you have to have freedom and liberty and a focus on the individual over stability. And conservatives are always going to have to struggle with that because there's a line, right? I think we're seeing that line being crossed over and over and over and over again, where individual desire is always being pushed over a sense of law and order or stability. And at a certain point, we have to start asking ourselves, where does this line get crossed and go too far? And that's fine. But that's a very large conversation to have over many discussions. Let's just deal with this one first. This is something that has bothered me for a long time because ultimately Tim Pool is saying something that I've heard from a lot of people for a long time, especially Christians. One of the let's just put it like this. This goes back to the concept of Christ explaining that what has been made one cannot be made two again. That's all. And it was effectively a damper on divorce. And for a lot of Christians, what that means is that under no circumstances, period, can you get divorced. And a lot of people have questioned that because obviously there has to be some room in most people's minds for divorce that occurs because of abuse. There's always been some kind of carve out for infidelity. And there hasn't really been a good Christian answer to why you need those things. Because all they can really point to is Christ's ideal of a marriage being forever, being sacred, and it is. But one of the things that really stuck out to me when I was originally reading the Bible is this passage. This is Matthew 7:21. And this is Christ explaining, I'll just read it. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? Did we not do mighty deeds in your name? Then I will declare to them solemnly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. The first time I heard that, I remember thinking that this was a sort of a weird, passive-aggressive thing for God to say. That you never knew these people? Are you not God? Are you not somebody who knows all that you are? Are you not omnipotent? What are you talking about? And I remember discussing this. I wasn't a Christian yet, and I was reading the Bible for the first time, and I was asking a lot of people about this line because I just thought it was a lie. What do you mean you don't know them? You're judging them, are you not? So what do you mean by you never knew them? Now, of course, the poetry of this is saying that God did not have a relationship with these people, right? That you didn't really do any of these things in my name and with me. So we never had a relationship to speak of. And that's really what God is always asking from us. Ultimately, God is always asking from us a relationship. But I think it also applies in another way. I think what he could also be saying here, when he says that I never knew you, is because is that there's a certain kind of sinner. There is a certain kind of problem maker. There is a certain kind of evildoer who will do the things that they do because they lack identity. They are impossible to know. They themselves do not know why they do what they do. Or they lied to themselves. They are liars and they are lying to themselves about all of this stuff that they do. And what they ultimately come up with are lies that bolster this idea of themselves as martyr or saint. And ultimately, by doing that, they don't know who they are. God can't know who they are. We don't know who they are. They're a non-person. When Steven Crowder, look, let me put it this way. If Steven Crowder is one of those people and he is abusing Hillary Crowder, my argument here is that their marriage was never correct. It was never actually consummated. It was never a covenant. Because you can't make a covenant with a non-person. You can't show up and make a deal with somebody. You can legally, of course. I'm not trying to explain here that all legal contracts are out the window because you do them with bad people. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about something more spiritual. That covenant that you make is with a person that you think you know. And if it turns out that that's not the kind of person they are, that they lied to you on purpose about who they are, that is a marriage that should never have been walked into. That is a marriage that was annulled long before it was ever consummated. Because somebody's lying. That's actually true for a lot of legal paperwork as well, to a certain extent, right? If I promise in this contract, in a contract that I make with you, that I am going to do A, B, and C because I am A, B, and C, and I'm none of those things, the contract is void. I'm not locked into the contract with you where I have to beg you to keep fulfilling the contract. That's not how this works. It's never how it's worked. And as we know about people with narcissistic personality disorder, they do something called love bombing. And frankly, people do this without having a personality disorder. You can lie to somebody and tell them that they are going to get so much of what they want. And just lie. Lie because what you want is some kind of sense of stability from them that they can give you when you get married. Or you don't want to be the last one in your friend group to get married, or whatever stupid, narcissistic, selfish thing that you've told yourself. So there has to be a cutout for that. And I am talking about spiritually here. I'm talking about theologically. I'm talking about culturally, traditionally, societally. We have to have a cutout for when somebody says, this person is not the person I married. I married a ghost, a phantom, a figment of my imagination that they presented to me. And it turned out to be a lie. And it took 10 years for me to understand fully what was going on, because for 10 years I begged this person to be the person they promised to be when they married me. That is why Hillary Crowder has every right not only to divorce Steven Crowder, but to get a portion of his estate, to be able to see her children. That's what she needs to get from all of this. And she has a right to do it. And if you're a conservative, you think that too.